Well, just by way of introduction, I think it was late summer 1979 when we were finishing our work at the excavation site. And one of the neighboring ranchers came bumping out across the prairie and stopped where we had worked, where we were working. And he said, well, I guess it was about 15 or 20 years ago when they had a bunch of idiots out here from the Smithsonian digging around out here. And he said it didn't make much sense to me. He said, I'm just convinced that we were all a bunch of idiots. And now I said, I'm even more convinced. He said, I just got a telephone call from somebody down in Denver, Colorado, and they said, well, if you would go out and leave a message to me out there at the Agate Basin site. And the message was that we all ought to come down to Denver tomorrow to the rendering plant down at Commerce City, because we're going to cut up a dead elephant. And he said, I don't want any more to do with you people. That just absolutely doesn't. I'm just totally convinced that you're all a bunch of nuts. So what happened was really there was a wildlife park out in California. I think it was out of Escondido, and they had an Asian elephant. It wasn't an African elephant. It's an Asian elephant, female. Her name was Margie, and they were moving her from there to Denver, and somewhere along the way, she developed something or other, and they didn't know what to do with her. And they decided, well, maybe if we drop her off with some other elephants at the Denver Zoo there, maybe it would help. But nothing seemed to help in any way, so she finally just laid down in the truck and died. And then they just hauled her into the rendering plant down there in Commerce City. And state archaeologist down in Colorado at that time, his name was Ripito, Bruce Ripito. Some of you might be familiar with the name. But he was quite a character, and he was always looking for something. And he had gotten a little bit interested in this elephant butchering and elephant spearing, and experimental archaeology was doing pretty good at the time. Anyhow, the elephant's name was Margie. She weighed over 10,000 pounds. And so Ripito finally, he got a hold of the man in charge there at the rendering plant. And Ripito was one of these guys, you know, that could fiddle a refrigerator to an Eskimo. And he talked the guy into just putting this Margie in the shed there and trying to keep her away from the sunlight and everything until Monday morning.
Just go ahead, keep talking.
And said then we could, you know, experiment with her a little bit. Well, Bruce, I think he must have gotten a hold of every archaeologist in the country. And early Monday morning, there was about 150 people showed up. There was a bunch of archaeologists and quite a few curious people and a little bit of the news media. And didn't really know what to do. It was for sure there was no way we could stand that elephant up, you know. So finally, the Bruce Ripito, we convinced the man to, he had a big front end loader there. He said, well, just tie a chain around the legs and we'll, you know, we'll get her up in the air. She's upside down, so that won't make any difference whether you butcher her upside down or crossways or anything else. So that's what happened. And
just click on the left-hand side, George. Yeah, now.
Okay, anyhow, this is Margie. weighs over 10,000 pounds. That's actually it was an Asian elephant. And this was before we got the front end loader or the big crane there to lift her up in the air. And this is in the process. And I think this was, we told Bruce he could take the first attempt at spearing the elephant, and this is what happened. And it worked. You got a spear into it. And then this is yours truly, and then we got to do the second one. And then we more or less always got a lot of people around, and we got all kinds of experimental stone tools, and we skinned most of it. And I think by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody was completely covered with blood and gore. And the animal really didn't smell too sweet. It killed a bit, 3 or 4 days. So at that point, we turned it over to the people at the rendering plant, and they, they cut her up, and I managed to get a hold of most of the bones. We still have it in our collections. I thought we were pretty lucky to get them, although they did save one femur and I forget 2 or 3 other bones, because Ripito and Dennis Stanford of the Smithsonian wanted to use it to do some experimental breakage on elephant bone, and this was about the time when everybody got excited about bone flakes. We found out that you could take elephant bone, bang it and get a flake off of it, and maybe make a tool out of it. So they kept those 2, and the rest of it I took up. Well, we didn't have any way to render the thing and get the bones cleaned up, but somebody told one of the paleontologists, said, well, all you need to do is find a pond somewhere that's pretty much a dead pond, doesn't have any fresh water coming into it. And all you need to do is just throw those bones in that pond for about 3 months, and then all the the wildlife in the pond will clean those bones up in good shape. And it worked. We left the pond right alongside the Ag Basin site, and we actually had those bones cleaned out by the time before the pond froze over. And we still use it. We're very happy to have those bones. Well, I've made quite a collection and made a lot of talk and done a lot of expressed a lot of opinions on prehistoric hunting. In fact, I could spend the rest of the evening here and show you what I consider idiotic pictures of people hunting, or artists' ideas of people hunting. Well, I guess this is one of them right here. Pretty far-fetched. You got all kinds of people around there, and you got that.
Just click OK when you see that, okay?
Well, we got that poor little critter who's sinking down in a hole or in a bog or something. He's going to have enough arrows in him to outfit an army. But, we don't think they even had a bow and arrow around there at that time. The other thing is, what in the world are they going to do with that animal after, once they kill it? What are they going to do? They've got to butcher the thing. And part of my collection is also centered around artists' ideas, and artists' ideas on hunting are about as far-fetched as anything to get. And they always, just about inevitably, this is one I think it was in Russia, they always have people getting rocks. They take rocks and they throw the rocks at them, and they dump rocks on them, and they have dogs barking. People being flung there, hunters not going to work very much. That poor little guy there. Well, here we go again. There's another one. Got this poor old animal, and look at people back there going to throw rocks at him. They want to throw rocks at him. Not a very good idea. Well, there's another one. Poor old animal is fallen into some sort of a trap. And here you got all the people throwing rocks at it. And spears. And here we go again. Well, this poor old Mammoth is in bad shape, but he's got that one guy up there swinging arms at him. He's doing too much good. Well, and another one that came up about that time was fire. Well, they have to propose fire drives to drive animals into traps and over bluffs and everything. Well, this is one, of course, they had the idea of a horse. This is a horse thing over in it was over in France. But anyhow, I've fought enough range fires in my life to know that when you start a fire, you never know what it's going to do. And it's just not a very good strategy to try to drive animals with fire. And I just flatly say it won't work. But then, some people come up with an idea. Too bad here. Might just get a loop and try and trap the thing. Well, it's pretty obvious that this kind of experimentation wasn't going to get me very far, or get anybody very far. But the next year, I was at the Smithsonian, and Gary Haynes was a graduate student there, and he was a person that had some pretty good contacts over in Zimbabwe. And he was doing work with African elephants and done some very good work, in fact. Well, my wife happened to nail him one day and said, look, why don't you talk to this game manager over in this wanky national park over in Zimbabwe and see if he would entertain the idea of letting me go over and do a little experimental work, butchering and punching holes in African elephants. I didn't think it would work, but the wife had a real gift of gab. And by gosh, what do you know? It was approved. So I got, I used up what little nest egg we had at that time to get airfare to fly over to Johannesburg, and then flew from there up to Harare, capital of Zimbabwe. And of course, that used to be Rhodesia at one time. And they have a big national park over there, Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Anyhow, it's right close. If you look on the left over there, Victoria Falls, and the Wangi National Park is right close by. Now, this is right next to Botswana, and they have a real problem in the national park because all the poachers come over from Botswana. And the poachers in that part of the world are pretty mean. One trick they have with elephants is just go out around the water hole and put out landmines. Landmine blows 1 foot off an elephant. And it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for the animal to die. But an elephant with 3 feet is not going to make it. Well, it didn't really know just what to do. I'd had Bruce Bradley made me a few projectile points, maybe some Clovis points. And I wanted to, of course, see if they would penetrate African elephant hide. And there's no way in the world I could take any spear on a plane over to Johannesburg, and up to Zimbabwe. And when they got over there, I got over to Gary Haynes, and we went out and we started scouting around the country looking for elephants. Well, this is what they call a pan. This is a place where they water. They have water down about 3 or 4 feet. And, this is a typical elephant family, about 32 animals. You look on the left, that old woman there, that's an old matriarch. And the one on the right, it's a sub-matriarch. Well, those 2 women, they just sit there and they dare anything or anybody to come close and make any threat whatsoever to any of those elephants. And of course, elephants are the matriarchal group. matriarch controls the family, and he also protects them. And as I say, we stood there about 3 or 4 hours watching them. We noticed some bones down there we wanted to look at, but we were very careful not to get close enough to make the old matriarch or the sub-matriarch unhappy. It's just the same picture, so we don't need to worry about it. Well, since they are a matriarchal group, the whole pattern, the plan of elephant culling is to do away with an entire family, and you have to do away with the entire family. If you don't, you're going to have rogue elephants all over the country, and another family will not take an elephant from another family, and they're a real danger. After all, this is a national park. So the culling operation, the people are totally committed to taking an entire family. Well, the first morning, Clem Coetzee, he was the main person, the wildlife, controlled all the wildlife operation. So he told me to get in the bunkhouse, and when he started his Land Rover next morning, he tooted his horn and got in it, and away we went. We went about 30 kilometers through the brush, and all of a sudden he stopped, piled out, and he said, well, you might want to stick fairly close to me. So I did. I was sticking to him like glue. I've never seen anything like this before. So this is what you see. There's a matriarch elephant there. And she is telling the shooter, by gosh, you know, you better get away or you're going to be in trouble. And they'll usually make about 2 or 3 false charges. And these hunters, they know what they're doing. And on that last charge, what do? They shoot that animal. And they shoot him right through the head, and that bullet has to go through all the way into the brain. And here's the shooter. Look at that. The guy's only got one arm yet. And here he has nailed that matriarch right through the bullet has gone into the brain. The animal is totally immobilized and just dropping. Same thing, the animal is just dropping. And then what happens? Well, all the rest of that family, and I think there was 36 animals in this family, all the rest of those animals, all they did was just crowd on this poor old matriarch looking for protection. And there you see, you just have a pile of elephants. They're desperate. They don't know what to do. They're looking for protection from the matriarch. The matriarch, of course, was long gone. So what are the rest of them? They have about 4 more shooters. They just come and they can take a smaller, 30-06 or whatever they happen to have, and just go up and just kill the rest of those animals. You know, it's over with in a matter of about 5 minutes, at the very, very most. And you've got a really big pile of dead animals. So that's the secret of how they cull elephants and how they do it one family at a time. Next morning we went out and they had another family about the same size. Same thing. Shoot the matriarch, let the rest of the animals crowd on the matriarch, and then they just kill the rest of them. Sad sight, but there they are. Well, they then start work. We've got a whole cater of butchers, trucks, and the whole bit that follow up. About 150 butchers, and they just start butchering all those animals. Skin them, they take the hide off in patches. They don't know in the world can you really take the whole hide off an elephant. It's just too awkward. But they have it all figured out, and they You know, they salvage every bit, even the trunk. The trunk of an elephant is probably the most valuable leather product that there is. And they bring a big price. And they can also take elephant hide now, and they could then, largest than 25 years ago. And they probably improved the process a lot more. But, you know, they can take that elephant hide in and cut it to any thickness they want, and it's mighty tough stuff. And mighty good stuff. Well, I finally decided I ought to try something, so I cut a piece of thin, pretty heavy shaft, all kinds of wood there, and mounted one of Bruce Bradley's points in it. And I punctured this one elephant right here, right behind the shoulder. I got the man and one of the butchers to hold as I said, they wouldn't let me take a camera along the road. They just had so much bad publicity in killing all these elephants. So it would have been nice if I had a cameraman along and could have posed a little bit. Impressed everybody with what I could do, but I couldn't do it. First time in elephant hide, this is a female, a mature female. And that hide is thick and it is tough. And you soon find out why, because everything in Africa, that part of Africa, or Zimbabwe, whatever you want to call it, has got thorns on it. And boy, those thorns are mean. This one bush they call a wiglet bush. And when you get tangled up in that, you wait. Because you're not going to get out of it without losing a lot of hide, a lot of clothes, unless you just very carefully let somebody help you take out one of those thorns. I think probably, and I measured quite a bit of mammoth hide in the Zoological Museum in St. Petersburg. I think probably elephant hide is tougher than mammoth hide. And it's pretty. It's just plain tough. I put every bit of strength I could behind the spear here, and almost through my shoulder joint. And I did get it. I got the point into the rib cage. And then I thought, well, I'll try a shot into the neck. Bad decision. There's no reason in the world. It's not a good idea to try. This is the front leg here, of course, then you can see part of the head. And yeah, I punctured the hide, but it also went into the big cervical and just snapped the point. Didn't do a bit of damage. Didn't hit any vein that let any blood out or anything else. So I decided right there that trying to spear or African elephant in the neck was just a real bad decision. Well, what is it? Remember here many years ago there was used to have a lot of cartoons around that said, happiness is a big gut pile. Well, boy, look at there. That's, I guess happiness. Lots of gut piles there. And off the left there, that's the Gary Hayne, by the way. And we're just beginning to start butchering and stripping the meat on these animals. Again, all the butchers very busy, got pretty well skinned. All the animals were just about skinned. Well, how do you turn an elephant over? Well, what they do is they strip the meat off one side, and then they get a whole herd of people there, and they have a little song they sing, and they hook one to the front leg with the hide, and they all give a big pull, and they turn the elephant over and strip the other side. Here we go again, doing the same thing. Pretty hard to tip over an elephant that weighs 15,000 pounds. And here we go again, getting one side and then the other. And you can see there in the background, we've got trucks coming in. Well, they skin the animals and they strip those animals, and it looks like there's a lot of meat there that's going to waste. Don't believe it. When those butchers get done, they've got just about all of the meat that is worth saving. They don't take any of the bones. They just strip all the meat from the carcasses. Well, I decided to maybe try and do a little butchering experiment, since I didn't think I could do any more spearing animals. The top there is that one of the points that Bruce Bradley made. It's one of the best ones I had. And the bottom there is a quartzite plate from Spanish diggings. Now I had 2 or 3. I had a nice biface, and it was pretty good sized biface out of Arkansas uplift chert. And you know, that chert edge on that biface would cut about 2 or 3 inches of elephant hide, and it would just refuse to cut anymore. However, this quartzite point turned out to be the best butchering tool that I had. And there it is, and there's a cut on the hide of a female, mature female. And I'll tell you, when I got that much hide cut on that animal, that edge of that tool had to be resharpened. It would not cut another, wouldn't cut another inch of that hide. And that hide is just tough, and not only that, of course, it's full of dirt and dust and other things. But actually, that little quartzite butchering tool is pretty darn efficient. And once you got it cut, you got the hide cut, I could take that tool and I could skin with it just about all day. I could take that hide off an elephant just about as fast as anybody can with a steel knife. It's remarkable how efficient, or how a steel knife, you know. You didn't sharpen it the way they did. You just cut a bunch of nicks in it, so you had a continuous serrated edge. This articulation of elephant bones, well, you know, elephants, they have a very strange, or I should say different type of suspension. It's, they don't bend their legs much. And they don't have, consequently, they don't have any deep-seated muscle attachments. And the best description I can come up with in disarticulating, for example, a femur and tibia, is if you just take a big plastic bandage and wrap around it, then all you have to do is just cut that bandage and it just falls apart. There's a good example of it right here, and here I'm still using this same quartzite tool. It's fairly easy. You don't have that deep-seated muscle attachments that you do with smaller mammals, such as bison or even domestic cattle. You've cut that meniscus, cut that, what do they call it around there? I can't think of the proper name for it. And, you know, it just falls apart. And here, this is my biface tool that incidentally I lost. Somebody will find it over in Africa someday. Here, man, oh man. Anyhow, this is, as you can see, you just cut that, whatever you want to call it. It has a name and I can't think of it. All you have to do is cut that. You don't have any deep-seated muscles. It just falls apart. And here again, the same thing. Here's a humerus radius, or humerus and radius. You can see there's just no deep-seated muscles at all. All you need to do is just cut around there, and those articulations just fall apart. Here's a femur and tibia, and now I'm back with my good old quartzite tool. And all you have to do is just cut around that, and it just falls apart. Real simple. And I think maybe that'd be one of the reasons, we're not finding a lot of, you know, tool marks on mammoth and mastodon. Well, I guess I had to throw this in just to have a good philosophy and remind me of myself. You know. some of the young people have different ideas than us old folks. Well, then I decided that I wasn't going to get any further that year, so I talked to Tim Coatsy and I said, well, would you let me come back another year? I'd like to try some different things. One thing I wanted to do was try an atlatl and dart, and also more thrusting spears. So he said, yeah, come on back. He said, I'll put up with you another year. I don't know why. I'm sure you're crazy and all that. So that winter, I guess of 84, or 84, I did a lot of experimentation with different kinds of wood. The first thing I discovered is you're not going to use willow for shafts if you want to, get a lethal shot into anything like an oak. It just isn't strong enough wood. It just shatters and falls apart. So I decided on chokecherry, and I decided to experiment with some various kinds of contact between foreshaft and main shaft. And I really like the one on the far right with both a taper and a straight shaft, but you just about have to wind up with just a tapered foreshaft and fit into a tapered hole. The one in the middle there doesn't work at all. I mean, it works fine, but I have a habit of snapping right there at the where you cut it off square. And when you're trying to get off another shot, and you can't get a foreshaft in here because this plug is in the hole. It's just like being elk hunting on your gun jams. You're going to have to do some pretty quick calculations, or it's just going to be too late. The chokecherry turns out to be good wood. I've got a sample over here. The only trouble with chokecherry is it never ceases to twist and turn and bend. I had this one perfectly straight here a while back, and now it's got more doglegs in it than you can count. But if you are careful with it, if you store it right, if you keep it properly under the right kind of tension, it'll work. And it really is tough material. Far superior to wool and far superior to serviceberry too, which was pretty popular during the bow and arrow period. Well, I had Bruce make some more points, and one thing I learned a long time ago is that the big secret in having successful weaponry, everything has to be perfectly straight. Your main shaft has to be perfectly straight. Your foreshaft has to be perfectly straight. The cup in your atlatl has to be just right. I had a real hard time one day. The cup with a little cup in the end of the main shaft just didn't quite fit the spur of my atlatl. I would just create enough of a twist. I couldn't get off good shots. The other thing I learned very quickly is you don't need a big, heavy sinew wrapping. When I first started doing this, I'd have a sinew wrapping there, as big as your thumb. Well, all that did was stop the point when you reached it, when it was going in. And the other point is that Clovis point to me is the most beautifully designed. It's a simple design. Well, I'll tell you, it is designed perfectly. You've got a sharp point on it to get through that height. You've got sharp blade edges to cut the hole bigger. And then you just enough of a restriction there that the sinew wrappings will not stop the point from going on in. And then, of course, you have to wrap that main shaft because with a point such as a Clovis point, you get all that pressure that comes back on the base of the point. And if you don't have a good sinew wrapping back there, you're going to split the point, or split the foreshaft, and once again, you might as well have a rifle that jams. This was one, didn't work out at all. This was a piece of chert from over at over the other side of the Green River. It's a bluish chert. It looks like it's great stuff, but it just has no strength whatsoever. Every one that I used, it just crumbled. Well, there's the great white elephant hunter. As I say, I couldn't have a camera with me, a cameraman with me. So I finally talked one of the blacks into taking a picture of what I have my hand on. I think that's an ideal weapon. I had good luck with it. The one on the right was just too heavy. I cut a stick over in Africa. I tried to shave it down and make it the right weight. Just too heavy. It just wasn't good at all. And that you can see off on the bottom there. It's one that I made out of a piece of skunk brush. And I don't have it with me right now. Well, at a distance of about 20 meters, 60 feet, you could just sink that shaft. This is going to have to splice it too, as you can see. The one thing about the elements, you got sinew you wouldn't believe. It's sinew that's just no end to it. So I lots of sinew to strengthen that shaft. And here you can see a good puncture up. This is pretty high on the back. But if you look over there, you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And those are other punctured by the same, by that same main shaft and foreshaft. It's unbelievable how much strength or how much power you can add to a shaft and arrow point and everything with an atlatl compared by trying to do it by hand, by threshing spear. It just worked perfect. Here is that same one. And you can see that shaft has gone right in right to where you hit the main shaft. Right up to the, so you've got about 8 inches of penetration. Once you get through that hide, and there you can just take your finger and push it all the way through. Okay, here we go again. Same shot. Notice those 3, 4 down on the bottom. Another one up here, and the end of the main shaft right here. And here I pulled the point out, and no damage to the point whatsoever. Everything just worked beautifully. So I was pretty pleased with all of this. But you can get into problems. There's one thing, there's about, as far as I'm concerned, we're doing spear elements. There's a pretty limited place, or a pretty limited area that you need to get that point into the rib cage. And one of them is not down over the heart. I don't think there's anywhere in the world that you can take an atlatl dart and get a heart shot on an African elephant. Those ribs come down there and they flatten out and they just form a nice protection over that heart. Well, you can see this is what happened. There's the tip of the end of the point you can see in the rib. Broke the shaft, busted the point, broke all of the sinew wrappings, and you just can't do it. You've got to get up further, preferably inside the rib cage, where those ribs are nearly round and the point will just go in and then slip right around the rim. And once you get that point inside, the animal takes a step and you got all that point moving in there. It doesn't take long for get enough inside hemorrhaging, the animal is gone. And don't get in a hurry. This is, again, I don't remember, somehow I needed another pointer right quick, and I took this one and I didn't get it down to where it fit the atlatl cup just right. And if it doesn't, you have any movement, that's what happens. It just goes sideways with you. So, care of weaponry. Well, this doesn't look like it's a very good shot, but unfortunately, this animal was standing crippled and gotten up. And I was able to get off a couple of pretty good shots. And this one went right through part of the front day. And actually into the rib cage. And then it just collapsed again, and you can see what happened. That was a good shot. But the problem was, if you got an elephant that's standing, you know, they're quite a ways off the ground. You can almost stand underneath one of those things. So here you are with an atlatl, you know, and you're used to using it pretty level. You got to aim that thing up pretty high to get it into the rib cage of an elephant, which is a long ways off the ground. Well, this is Gary Haynes. Give you an idea of what you're up against. This is an elephant skull split right down the middle. Okay, what the shooters do, what the hunters today, you shoot that animal right on the forehead, right in here, and that bullet has to go back into this into this brain cavity. And then, of course, when that happens, the animal collapses. But you're not going to do it with Clovis weaponry. You're not going to get a Clovis point on a shaft to go through all of that. There's just too much bone, too much muscle cavity, or just bone cavity. So that shooting an animal with a Clovis point, the way they do shoot them in the elephant code, is just completely out. You can't do it. Well, that's probably give you a pretty good idea of what happens when you're trying to use an atlatl on elephants. Next question that everybody asks, well, is that meat fit to eat? Well, you know, they're not out after old bulls. The bulls are gone. The bulls are all off to themselves. The only time the bulls will come into the herd is when the female comes in to eat. But so they're mostly killing nursery herds, and nobody bothers to kill a bull elephant because they're going to be big, they're going to be tough. They're not going to be very good. Well, when the call is done, when they kill the animals, the shooters and the others, they get together and they have a nice little piece of meat right between the, kind of like, almost like the hump on a bison, kind of right between the scaps up here. And on, naturally get a 3-4-year-old or something that's pretty good. This meat about that big. Well, then they cut out the heart and cut it into squares. Cut this other piece of meat in squares. And then they cut out some of the really gut fat. Get big wads of fat and they'll cut that into squares. And they'll start a fire and they cut a green stick, you know, and make those nice shish kebabs. And if somebody is thoughtful enough, they'll throw an onion or two in on the way out. You can. And, you know, it's pretty darn good. It tastes just about as good as any wild meat that I know of. So there you have it. Shish kebabs out in the field in Zimbabwe. And, you know, it's pretty darn good. There you have it. Well, what do they do with the meat? Well, this is just part of a day's kill. They've got all of it in there. See, it's hung up. Got about 150 butchers there. They're going to start to work on that meat. And they butcher it all up. They, you know, strip it, cut it into strips, and you've got all these people who just put it out on, you know, these, what it is chicken wire about 6 feet wide. These long racks, and just got acres and acres of the darn stuff. And strangely enough, flies don't bother much, or didn't bother much. And what they do is they haul off all the heads and other stuff off about 2 miles out of camp, and that's where all the jackals and the lions and all the other animals eat, and they don't bother the meat here at all. And after about 4 days, well, it looks pretty black. They don't use much of this for human consumption. They ship it all over Africa. A lot of it goes for dog food and other uses, all the humans. Some of them, they get it nice and fresh, they like to use it. Well, I'll tell you, that's a lot of meat. Tusks, well, of course, the ivory trade in Africa is supposedly, that's what most of the poaching is for, of course, is for ivory. And many of those poachers just pile in there when they can. They come in from Botswana, cross the border into the north, and so those poachers are about as cruel and mean as anybody can possibly get. You know, we think poachers in this country are bad. Well, they like to, get out and use a dart on a rhino and then take a chainsaw and cut the horn off so they can sell that to the Chinese for aphrodisiacs. And the elephants die, they'll just cut the tusks off and leave it. And some of the traps, some of the things that those poachers have come up with, it just makes you almost sick to see what they do. And when you see some of these animals that are caught in some of these traps, it's pretty hard to take. So this is all government regulated tusks, and this is all from the elephant coat. Well, the next question people come up with is, why do they do this in the first place? What's the idea of culling these animals? Well, it's just like having feral horses in Wyoming or anything else. You get too many elephants and you don't have any feed left. This is what a real good elephant country looks like. And this is what it looks like when you've got too many elephants. Well, when they clean out the country, there's not much left. It's, they're right at the top of the food chain. And the last thing they'll do, there's more of it, is on the way to just, being desolate. More of the same. And then the elephants will come on, they take their tusks and they just go round and round and round these acacia trees and other trees, and of course the tree dies. They do this if they can't push it over. You get a big old elephant that weighs 15,000 pounds. You can just take a pretty good sized tree and just keep rocking that thing and push it over. So the point is that when the elephants get done with a piece of country, when the elephants die, everything else is gone. And I don't know, this is one area where Richard Leakey and I really just didn't agree at all. He doesn't believe in open cause of killing elephants. What are you going to do? You've got too many elephants. You have to have some way to control the population. Now I guess they are guarding most of the elephants. And that's a pretty expensive proposition. They have to guard an elephant and then go in and load it up on a truck, and what are you going to do with it? The population, the human populations are expanding rapidly, and that's one of the reasons, of course, they have the problem in the first place. There's too many humans. Well, I got lucky one day, and I always wanted to get a, what is it? Marcel? Jackal. No, it's not a jackal. Marcel?
What?
What's that skull?
Hyena.
Hyena skull. Well, by God, I got lucky one day and run into a carcass out there, and I salvaged the skull. I wanted one real bad for our collections here. And remember, the hyena is the one animal that really chews up and crushes bone with their teeth. You've got the darndest set of massive teeth you ever saw. And I salvaged this, and by golly, it took me several days, and I got enough paperwork from the wildlife people there. The stacked papers that high. I got enough paperwork to bring that thing home. So we have this, hyena skull in our collection. And I'll tell you, it's a pretty impressive thing to see the dental equipment that those hyenas have. And if you get into a hyena den, that's one way you can identify it. You just see all these broken bones, just crumbled, crunched up bones. And they're about the only animal that does that. So that was a kind of an interesting little side trip. Well, and then you're right close to Victoria Falls. You have to go take a look at Victoria Falls. And then you can, Zambezi River comes in, and they got more wildlife up there. Watch out for those big old crocodiles. Man, those things are deadly. They're always losing humans, one of those crocodiles. Well, that's an impressive sight. That thing, and you get all this fog and everything that comes out, and you've got a great big area out there that is just a rainforest. And it all comes from all of this mist that comes off the bottom of the falls and goes out over this area. It's pretty impressive. Well, there was one little, spin-off that came from this. This is the points from the Clovis site. So I didn't know. We did some, I guess how to approach it. Anyhow, a person wanted to do some some microscopic work on the tools that I use and the points that I use, and compare them to the Clovis points from the Clovis site. And actually, the results were pretty good. Some of the patterns that I think he was using up to 400 to 500 diameters, and some of the things on the points that I use spearing elephants looked very close to what turned up on the Clovis points. So, it's interesting. I'd like to see it go further than that. But, anyhow, it looks like what we did and what I did in Africa might be supported a little bit by what we actually found at the Clovis site, which pretty well condensed any patterns, any whatever you want to call it, damage to these points, was probably done by spearing mammoths. That's about all I can tell you about elephants. Probably more than you'll ever want to know. Anybody has any questions or comments?
I have a question. Did you say that elephants use their tusks to scrape off the bark?
Might have impeded the penetration. I don't think so. As I say, the mammoth hide that I measured, I think is probably much easier to penetrate than an African elephant. Boy, that hide is tough.
Is that in reference to like thickness of the hide? In reference to the thickness of the hide between the mammoth and the elephant, or?
Well, there's a little difference in thickness, but it's just tough.
Okay.
It's just plain darn tough. And like I say, if you deal with those vegetation and those whatever you have in Africa, it's pretty easy to see why.
The Nako mammoth has a number of projectile points that were interpreted as being in between the shoulder blades, right? You think that would have been an appropriate way to knock one of those things down? Put some of them in the back,
Well,
right behind the head?
I never tried it, but I doubt it. I'd have to have somebody prove it to me. I think the best way to go is right into the ribcage. And how are you gonna get to the position where you, how are you gonna get to those animals, how, you know, they always got that little head going back to the rib. You got to, I think you just about have, the other thing, if you get it too far ahead, you're gonna get into the stomach cavity. Well, eventually that'll kill it on. Better to get it into the, you know, into the lung cavity. And once you get in the lung cavity and that point starts, you know, hemorrhaging the blood, they're not going to last too long.
Alternatively, like what you do with a water buffalo?
What?
The water buffalo,
Yeah.
Cape buffalo, if you shoot it in the leg and cripple it, could you cripple an elephant and then fill it full of spears? Would that help you?
Well, the idea is, you know, if you cripple an elephant, what are you gonna do when that little matriarch sitting on top of
Well,
it?
you guess you'd have to cripple her, right?
You better get that matriarch out of the way first. No, I don't think that would be a good strategy.
But you would have to injure or kill the matriarch first, or she's going to injure or kill you.
Well, you gotta get that matriarch out of the way. And incidentally, you know, as I say, what those shooters use over there, and this is what they use, .458 Winchester. With a jacketed bullet. You can't use the soft point bullet. It has to enter here, and it has to go all the way through all that bone and everything, and right into that brain cage. And believe me, those people don't miss. They don't miss. I never knew one to miss, and it would not be good if they did. The other thing they like is a 375 H&A column in Holland. But they all prefer the 458 Winchester. Believe me, it does the job. This is one I salvaged out. As you can see, it's jacked and bullet. No damage to it at all. You've got a soft point, it will expand, and it just won't go through then, all that bone. So,
Speaking of the targeting the matriarch, if that is relevant in, you know, for Clovis people, do you think that that could have contributed in any way to, you know, if the matriarch is taken out, then the rest of the group may not be taken in by another group. Do you think that may have in any way contributed to, or could contribute to the overkill hypothesis if it exists?
well, of course, people have argued that the Maynard side down there, what's the guy's name? North side.
Which side?
Maynard Mammoth side, who did the, you know, paleontologist.
I'm blank now.
Anyhow, he argues that it probably was a, you know, a family. And I don't know what to make of the Clovis side. Might have been a family, but I don't know. I think my idea, the ideal way to kill a mammoth would be to watch one of these young animals, and they do a lot of wandering around. And once they get out of sight of that matriarch, got a couple hunters that know what they're doing, and if they can get a shaft into one of those animals. Matriarchs, animals doesn't know anything is happening, and they just keep moving on down the line. I think 2 or 3 good hunters working together would be a lot better than just one. And the other thing is that elephants, well, they can't see worth a darn. Boy, can they smell. And you watch every shooter takes a old urn sack, you know, a little paper sack full of dust. When they get to where their family is, they just shake that bag and you watch that dust. And you got to get out of the wind. You got to get out of the wind. Once they can smell incredibly well. I sat right on a practically alongside a tree and then wouldn't wander by and, you know, they don't even see you. And they look back and, here comes the matriarch, you know, to see what's happening. But I don't see where it goes with the darn.
So George, if your experimental points replicated the same use where on these points, does that mean that they're spearing dead elephants?
Well, maybe not.
Dr. Frison, on an animal-related question, the assemblages at Spring Creek Cave and Doherty Creek Cave, those are so almost identical in composition and manufacture. Do you think those might have been the same people or the same group?
Sure could have been. Same age. Yeah, I think we were very close.
Have you done any, did you replicate and experiment with that weaponry?
What?
Did you replicate and experiment with Spring Creek, Doherty Creek, atlatls and darts?
Oh, yeah, that's when I started hunting.
Yeah.
Rabbits.
Yeah.
Snake chickens. Kind of, I say, here's a one that I worked up. This is choke cherry. It was nice and straight up and down. And this is the that one what I like. And this is another one of Bradley's points. You know, this
Everybody duck.
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 This will kill a man. I know, but, you know, pretty dangerous piece of weapon. Here a while back, you know, I gave a program and I said, well, this is what we kill about any animal, if anybody ever encountered in North America. Well, some little 10-year-old girl said, well, what about a grizzly? And I had to think a little bit about that. No, it'd be worth a darn on a grizzly. I think if I had this weaponry and encountered a grizzly, I'd put as much distance between me as I possibly could. But actually, all you need to do is, you know, just try to your lips. But you have to have that, look at this guy. And this is legal feather, I may get that in. So anyhow, I was doing this, I just brought it along. I like this outline. And actually it's one that's kind of patterned after one down in the southwest. I'm sure I so long. Leave you with those gems of wisdom.